Hey, everybody, it's Thursday.
And welcome to this week's edition of The Night Bite.
I'm Josh.
And I'm Emily.
Old-fashioned Emily.
Yeah, I know. I thought I could eat one of my cherries right before we came on, and I got the timing almost too close. I thought nobody would notice you called me out. But that's okay. It has felt like Friday since yesterday. I don't know, not a bad week, but it has felt like the weekend is coming. So I know people are really eager to get out and go fishing. I feel like this is the time of year where people say it's heating up. Do you think that you agree with that? You're laughing.
Yeah, I mean, I think figuratively and literally, I think that there's some hot bites to be found in between these cold fronts that seem to be popping in and out. And the water temp is starting to level out a little bit. You know, the nights aren't getting into the 30s; they're staying in the 40s, and we've had quite a bit of sunshine besides the couple of showers that we've had. So that heats up the water, and I think that gets fish going.
Well, and so we only were fishing one time this last weekend, poor us. But what we found is kind of the range of where fish are and what they're doing. So what I mean by that, there are a few fish that are hanging out kind of on that deeper edge of those shallows. I did catch one spawned out bluegill, which really surprised me because I would have expected the crappies to be spawned out first. But we also heard and saw a whole bunch of panfish way, way, way up in the shallows, like shallower than you can even cast. And so that is that spawning process. And so, I think you always hear, fish spawn between this and this temperature, it's always a range. And so this is that time of year where fish are doing kind of that range of things. So some of them were that super, super shallow, and some of them are just heading in and just heading out. And I guess what that says to me is that we are in the middle of some of those spawning processes. But that is okay because especially once that is done, that bite really starts to turn on.
Yeah, I mean, what Emily's talking about is our panfish. That includes our bass, our bluegills, our crappies, perch. They're pretty much done spawning. They spawn a little bit earlier, but stuff like like tonight, we're talking about muskies. Walleyes are done. That some of those colder water species have finished, but the weeds are starting to set up really nicely. And those predators that have come and spawned early, they're sitting there picking off little fish along in the weeds. So, I know you've heard it all over the place on social media right now, but yeah. Fish, you can be catching walleyes and stuff up shallow right now because they're still feeding from finishing up spawn. But as the panfish go, like Emily said, there was bluegills and bass like way up in the weeds. Like you might have hit them with a lawnmower if they were if they were any further up on shore. And then, but then, like we were saying, there's some we personally like to target the mid-depth fish, the fish that have already hit. Because it spawns a bell curve. We've said that the last few weeks where, early fish start and then there's late fish that go way past their temp and they just are later. And so right now I think we're hitting towards the peak of spawn. I don't think it's going to last a whole lot longer. The air temps, the weather temps look like it's going to stay warm. So I think those fish are going to start pushing out pretty quick, setting up along weed lines. And that's our favorite time of year for panfish. But so if you want to be fishing shallow panfish, get out there, and probably this weekend is going to be one of the best weekends for that. Otherwise, focus on the mid-depth structure. Some of those weed lines are setting up good. I think that's where I would be this weekend.
And when we're talking about fishing this weekend and possibly in the shallows, this is a great weekend for it to be because I want to say, isn't it Wisconsin Free Fishing Weekend?
Wisconsin Free Fishing Weekend.
So,
well, if you're from Illinois, it's next weekend is free weekend. This weekend, everybody else is free fishing. I'm just kidding. It's free fishing weekend this weekend. It's always the weekend after my birthday. I just have to give Emily a little hard time. She's from Illinois.
I have no idea what any of that has to do with it. You're just going to confuse people out there. But if you're fishing with Wisconsin waters this weekend and you normally have a fishing license and you're used to those nice calm waters, there might be a few extra people out there, but that is a good thing. And maybe it is the time of year to bring somebody who you don't normally fish with. Maybe let them have some of that fun with you.
Yeah.
But I think, when we're talking about having fun, there's a lot of fun to be had on the water and a lot of big fish fights. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about some of that. So let's bring in our guest for the evening. Taylor, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Looking forward to
Yeah.
talking to you.
What's so funny is I feel like actually one of the first places that we ran into is a boat launch, but we ran into your truck. And so I'm very familiar with your logo and your decal, and I feel like we fished some of the same waters. But this is honestly the first time that we're meeting, so we're so excited to have you. Can you maybe introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Taylor Flannery. I'm local to like the Pelican Lake area. I grew up here basically my entire life. I've been fishing, from, Summit Lake, Elko, Pelican Lake, all the way up to like Boulder Junction area. I cover an awful lot of water. But yeah, I'm pretty simple, and um, that's. I mean, there's nothing to it.
There's nothing to it. So tell us a little bit about your guide service. And I want to say, can you even tell us the name of your guide service?
Yeah, it is Musky Guarantee Guide Service, and funny bring it up that way. But so when I first started my guide service, 4 or 5 years ago now, I actually was kind of thinking of a way to, how to get people in the boat, and then also to basically show them that I wasn't just some guy that was going to take their money from them. I was going to work my butt off to get them the best experience and teach them everything I could, and to in the end game to land a muskie. So my first year that I did this part time, I actually guaranteed a muskie in the net, or you did not pay for your trip. I was also working at the Rhinelander paper mill at that time, so I actually assumed that I was only going to get probably 5 to 10 trips, that first year with not really being in the game very long, and it just absolutely went off. I had people messaging me from all over the states, really, to come up and catch a muskie. So um, one thing that I did not take into account was that I would be fishing with a lot of brand new anglers that had hardly caught a bluegill in their life, and you're basically teaching them everything that they need to know basics wise to catch a muskie and get it done. And you had to find about the hottest fish in the lake that was just gonna see red and just did not matter what they did to be able to catch one. And that first year I ran 48 trips, and we put a fish in the net 44 of those 48 trips. So I'm pretty proud of that stat, but not saying I wasn't stressed out a little bit or worried about not one at times. So there was actually one trip that I had a guy, he got bit like 8 times on top water and finally caught like the 7th one of the 8. So that was pretty wild, but yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, and to be honest, when I was poking around in your Facebook page earlier, I heard that maybe you had gotten some flack or something for your name. But I think that it's great, and I think that it's super eye-catching. And because it is people, honestly, even like me, that are already out there fishing. And it's funny because before the start of the show, we were talking about how Josh and I honestly both just within the last few months caught our first muskie each. And so, it's funny because we are on the water all the time. We have baits in the water all the time. And so, you hear, oh, it's a fish of 10,000 casts. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm sure we've made 10,000 casts, but not with the right bait, right? But you're making a really interesting point that not only is it a fish of 10,000 casts or more sometimes, right? But you are sometimes in the boat with people who are brand new to this. And that is scary.
Yeah, I got really good at picking out backlashes. So
So when you're bringing new people out, you're actually having them cast and stuff with equipment. You're not just trolling, or you're not just setting out floats or stuff.
correct. That's in the fall time. I do run live bait with suckers, but we're also casting. So I actually am not a troller. I understand that that's a great bite that a lot of people get on, but to me, it's the interaction with the fish and the boat side stuff that makes muskie fishing what it is. That's why I fell in love with it, and I want to share that with other people. So I always said that the day I couldn't catch one casting was the day that I would take up trolling, and I'm not to that point yet. So.
Fair enough.
yet.
But yeah, basically every trip with especially with new clients starts off with pretty much like a 25 to half an hour tutorial really of how to cast, how to figure out how to trigger fish with individual lures that they're going to be using. It's just and then I kind of gauge what they can do and what their capabilities are going to be from that, and then kind of base our strategy for the day off of that, which sometimes can be tough because say it's a rubber bite. Well, some people just can't rip rubber all day like I could, being used to it or wanting to do it. So to tell them to do that all day long is, that's not fun. So you got to kind of you know gauge what they're into and what they can do versus what is going to get bit that day. So that can be tough.
That's really interesting. I guess I never even considered because, we're so often fishing panfish. And so that's not so hard to, cast it around and everything. But we're talking about, in some of these cases, some really big baits. And when people are not used to, that they expect to get out there and like what they fish for, bluegills, maybe in some cases, but when you have like heavy rod and heavy line and heavy, equipment out there, that really takes it out of people.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. And I do know that people kind of expect being that it's musky fishing that you're gonna drive them, run them into the ground fishing, but that's just not the case. It's basically over time you kind of understand moon windows and feeding windows and weather patterns and when things are going to happen. So you basically tell them, hey, for this 2 hour time period we're going to grind it out, and then if you want to take a break you go right ahead, you sit there for 3 hours, I don't care, until that next window pops up. You can catch them off windows and off feeding periods, but for the most part, muskies are pretty predictable as far as when that window is going to open up. So that's kind of a nice thing. So you could have a 10-hour day and, you go to lunch in the meantime or whatever and just not really worry about it, and then come back refreshed and kind of ready for the rest of the night.
That's really interesting because I have to admit, maybe it's the pan fisher in me, or I don't know what it is, but I don't tend to watch all of those different like bite windows and things like that. I just tend to like go fishing, right? But that's really interesting to hear the feedback that sometimes that makes a difference. And it's kind of a fun idea to be able to plan things like lunch around it.
Yeah. And to be honest, you probably should watch like the moon phases and all that. A lot of times your wind switches when fish really go nuts are right on those moon phase peak, on those peaks in the day. Otherwise, like anytime the wind, if you have a peak midday and it's flat calm, you're going to get a little tiny breeze or a little ripple on that moon peak, where that can really light up even your panfish or your walleyes or that sort of thing. And a lot of times those moon peaks actually bring the bait fish up in the water column where they're feeding, aggressively, where that's why your musky windows are that same period as everything comes up in the water column and everything feeds upwards. So that's kind of correlates with what you guys are doing as well.
Okay, so I have to ask then, are you using like a specific app, a website? Is this already available like on your weather apps?
Yeah, that's just it's called Hunting and Fishing Lunar app. There's dozens of them out there, but the one that I use is the Hunting and Fishing Lunar app. It's a little blue, whatever. I think it's like $2.99 for like the entire year. Definitely worth it. So yeah, anytime I'm planning trips or guide trips or whether it be personal trips, I'm doing start times and end times based off those moon windows. So uh, you can't tell the weather a year out when you're booking dates. So you look at those moon dates, and those are the days that I would advise people to take, weather dependent kind of thing. So.
Awesome. I think it's really cool that there is all of that different information that is available. But when we think about fishing, that's also the thing that's available to anybody. And so when we kind of started talking earlier, we were talking about how, upcoming this weekend is free fishing weekend. So, for people who are maybe just not going to follow bait windows, they just want to go out and wing it, right? Do you have tips for those people as well?
Well,
I'm sorry. I told you I wouldn't put you on the spot.
No, it's fine. If you're not going to follow the moon periods or that kind of thing, obviously low light windows are always great times, and those usually do correlate with a moon window as well, whether it be sunrise, sunset, that kind of thing. But usually those are really good feeding windows too. But I would just tell you that you should probably fish, those low light windows. You could probably slide up a little bit shallower, do your thing, but in the heat of the day, maybe push off, off the breaks, off the weed lines or rocks, whatever you may be fishing, set back a little bit and get a little bit deeper in the water column to kind of trigger strikes off of those moon windows if that's what you're doing.
And then for people who, let's talk some basics. Like somebody who maybe let's even say this might be hard. Sorry, I don't mean to throw this at you. Like, if people who are just going to go for like a Walmart special this weekend, like they don't know what they want to do. Look at your face is so shocked. Well, because here's why. Is because there's people who there's musky rods available. People know, the places to go if you want to get fancy and all of that cool stuff. And so it's awesome. We can talk about that too, right? But with Free Fishing Weekend coming up, I mean, can you go to Walmart? Can you get a rod? Can you get a bait to fish musky with?
Honestly, I don't really know what's available at Walmart for like bait cast rods or reels. I would say your local Fleet Farm would be the best bet. They usually have, your St. Croix rods or even like a cheaper model of musky rod available, whether it be whatever, I'm not sure. But and then they usually have like a 300 size and a 400 size reel somewhere, whether it's Daiwa, Shimano, whatever it may be, but maybe the PC Fun as well. But otherwise, there's like small tackle shops and that always have, musky equipment and whatnot. But Walmart probably doesn't have the best selection of even, basic bucktails, topwater, crankbaits, whatever it may be. But your Fleet Farm and those small bait shops probably would be your better bet.
And so this time of the year, what do you recommend for baits?
Usually this time of year is smaller presentations, whether that's like your 7-inch, twitch baits or small top water work. Lake X Dr. Evil is a kind of a good one. Otherwise, there's a Little Bastard. It's called. It's actually like a bass size musky top water. Spinner baits are great. 500 to 700 series, bucktails, single blade bucktails, small rubber baits, whether that's, mini or mid Medusas, regular bulldogs, or pit bull is kind of upsized from that. What else did we catch on? Dive and ride, your 9-inch Suics, even 10-inch Suics. That's kind of the basic stuff. They've been around forever. I mean, they catch a lot of fish, but usually I'm not going much bigger than like say 10 inches in the early season.
And I think to follow up with your comment, Emily, even if you're looking at Fleet Farm or Walmart for stuff, just if you're coming up for the weekend, and you're looking at Free Fishing Weekend, don't forget to stop at garage sales, especially up this way, because there is a lot of fishing stuff that's available at some garage sales. So if you happen to drive by on your way through and you see, oh, look at, there's some fishing stuff, you can find some pretty good baits that are used for and get some of those that Taylor mentioned. There's always, every time it seems like there's some beat up Suics or some MEPs sitting around in there that may have seen better days, but they still work. So that's worth, I feel like that's worth mentioning, taking a look at that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and then I also kind of want to add in, not to be a musky snob or nothing, but it is actually very critical for like the health of the fish and our fisheries to have, if you are going to go out and try to cast for muskies, the release tools are actually more important than getting a bunch of baits and rods and all that good stuff. Having a great big net, which looks funny when you're waving it around, but the great big net, you can have it over the side. The fish swims free in the net. It's, it's in the water the entirety of the time. A long, say 11-inch, needle nose pliers, so you can get in and do your thing and get the fish off the hooks, or even a hook cutter. The Nip-X is like the best one out there as far as, getting in and getting done. If the fish is hooked really bad, it's easier just to cut hooks and back, get the fish back safely and that sort of thing. But you don't want these fish, out of water or, on the rug of your, the carpet of your boat or anything like that. So it is very important to have the release tools and all that good stuff ready to rock, including the baits. So.
Well, and I kind of laugh when you're like, not to be a musky snob, but like I think a lot of people want to treat that fish with respect. Like I think a lot of people want to hear those things. And honestly, I will throw myself into the bus if that's a thing, right? But because I myself, when I caught my first muskie, okay, so not to sound ridiculous, but it's a big fish, right? And so one of the things I'm working on is the gill hold. And so, with smaller walleyes, no problem. Big walleyes, still working on it. Freaks me out. Giant muskie. I thought that I was doing the right thing when I was using some of those plastic grippers, like right in the jaw. It wasn't anything sharp. It wasn't, I had it hooked in the right place. I thought I was being very gentle. And I will be honest, like I got some flack for holding the fish like that because even though I was supporting the body, I was told that that could potentially be doing damage to the mouth. And number one, I was super embarrassed because, I'm the kind of person I feel like I know like at least a little bit about fishing, right? But I had never heard that before, right? And so I always appreciate when people are musky snobs or crappie snobs or like whatever it is, right? Because when you have somebody who is an expert in how to treat that fish and release it, because I think especially for muskies, that's one of the fish that I would say most often gets released.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I think it's a boga grip that you're talking about. But so I've actually
Uh-oh.
Oh, you're back.
Are we good?
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah. So I've actually caught fish that have had like a broken, bottom jaw, and it's actually like, kind of twisted or whatever. And that's what that is that boga grip was hooked on there, and the fish started, a spin, and it just snaps its jaw. So that's why people say not to do that. But there is a right and a wrong way to go about handling, somebody that hasn't caught one or doesn't have the experience with them. You don't just bash them and tell them they're stupid and that they're going to kill the fish and all that. I mean, you say, hey, nice fish, but here's a better way to do that for next time. Like congratulations, but this is the conservation side of it. I think people take better to that versus getting attacked on the internet. That happens so often, which is kind of pathetic. So, yeah, we need to do better.
Okay, but when other people are getting attacked, at least I can learn from it too.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, and with your specific instance, Emily, I'm a fisheries professional, and I really feel that like in your instance, for somebody that for one, we were in the dark. For two, we were totally unprepared because we were not fishing for muskies.
I thought it was a big walleye.
and for three, when you aren't confident in your ability to like quote unquote hold it correctly, right? This is a next best thing. And so the fish wasn't super thrashy. We had played it out to get it in the net that we had, and we took care of the fish. We made sure it swam away. It was in great health when we put it back. The water was cold, so that helps.
You don't have to defend yourself.
I'm just saying there's that I'm not defending myself. I'm just saying that I guess where my thought was that if you aren't confident, you could do a lot of damage stuffing your hand in their gill and touching, that's vital organs. Those are their lungs. And so if you're smashing your hand up there, you don't know what you're doing, and then it starts thrashing around, you can get cut. That could all be a bad situation. So use the tools available. But like Taylor said, if you're planning on doing this for long term, go get the correct tools, because that's a prudent conservation move. That's all I would say.
Right.
All right. So I guess other than that, one of the things that I hear a lot about with musky fishing is live bait. And so I haven't heard you mention bait yet. So is it that maybe you don't need bait in spring, or maybe you just don't always need live bait in general?
Well, no, you don't really need live bait. And like, I would say most of your musky guys don't fish live bait until right around like the end of September. Usually when that water temp drops, that's when the suckers and all that good stuff happens. If you try to run a sucker in 75-degree water temps, it's just going to die in 10 minutes, and you just wasted $12. So it's not really worth it. But I actually have used like live northern pike if you catch a 14 to 19 inch northern pike, you can put that on a quick strike harness, and muskies slurp them down like a spaghetti noodle. So that's one thing you can do. But usually, if you're like in the early part of the year, you're fishing most of the time like shallow weeds, that sort of thing. So you kind of have, it's like a pain in the butt really to run live bait because you're constantly pulling it out of the weeds and you're getting hung up, and then you're not really fishing efficiently with your lures as well. So usually like midsummer is when I would do like the live pike thing, just because you can fish like the deeper breaks and stay out of the weeds, and then bring that fish to the boat, and then they'll turn off and they'll actually eat that pike then off of that. Same with fall time, you're off the deeper breaks and that sort of thing, so you're not really getting it hung up in the weeds and playing that game all day. So that can be kind of frustrating if you're doing that.
You had mentioned kind of a ways back about, maybe under a bobber and that your bait might get stuck and so not in the shallow. But it started making me think like, okay, so for a muskie, what kind of bobber are you using?
You can use either, there's like, I don't know what kind of bobber it is, but it's just a big styrofoam, like this big around kind of thing. And it's not even so much like, it's I don't know, like sometimes the sucker will pull it right underneath the water and it's, no big deal. But then it'll just pop it. It's kind of like Jaws when they put the big barrels on the shark, and then he pops up. That's kind of it. Eventually they're going to pop up, so usually when you first put them down, they kind of take the bobber down, but then as you're going with the trolling motor, usually it rises up and then it'll kind of hang true to where it's at. So yeah, usually something like that. Otherwise people will use like little balloons. They'll blow up balloons and attach them to the line, and they basically pop when you do that sort of thing. And then there's also, I think is it Thill or Fraybill, maybe Thill probably makes like a big bait bobber, and that's usually what I use. It's just a slip bobber. That way if you're fishing 20 feet of water, 30 feet of water, you can set that bait down 12 feet or whatever, and then you can actually reel through that slip knot versus getting stuck at that 12-foot mark and you can't net the fish. So Yep.
Yeah, I have seen the balloon, but that seemed like a lot of messing around to have a balloon. I don't know. It seems easier to have a bobber.
Like a birthday party.
Yeah, something like that. So I had given you kind of a hard time about people who are maybe new to this and shore fishing. But let's talk somebody who wants to get into this for real. And first of all, shout out to some of the musky clubs in the area, because I feel like there are so many different musky clubs across the state. So if tonight's episode isn't enough information for you, because I'm sure that it won't be, it's scratch the surface, right? But go out and meet some of the people in your area, right? And join one of those clubs, get those information, network with those people, because there's so much to learn. But I guess for people who maybe don't have that in their area, do you have, go-to rods or tackle or things that you could recommend to them?
Yeah. I would say that having one or two, really nice, good setups are probably more beneficial to you than buying a bunch of cheaper ones that are realistically going to break. Just the fact that you're throwing really big baits and a long time, just over and over and over again, you are going to break equipment musky fishing. So get, the best gear that you can get. I run the Chaos Tackle 2020 series. It's kind of like their higher end. They also have an original assault stick as well. Those are on the cheaper side, but they're still a good stick. Otherwise, obviously St. Croix, everybody knows the St. Croix name over in Park Falls. Elk River Rods makes really nice rods as well. Yeah, that's about that. Reels, I run the PC Fun. I actually really like the 300 series. That's about the best bang for your buck on the market. It's like, I think after discounts, it's like $75 for a musky reel, which is insane comparing to, the 300 for a Shimano Tranx kind of thing. But I beat the crap out of those reels every single day on the water, and I can't break them. So I am very happy with those. Yeah, and as far as baits go, I pretty much mentioned a lot of it, in the earlier talk here, but Your rubber baits, Musky Innovations or Chaos Tackle. They both have great rubber baits. Red October Tubes, that's rubber. Your swim baits, they can be Swim and Dogs, that's Musky Innovations, or there's a Poseidon from Chaos. Suic is a big name. They've been around forever. You have Musky Frenzy, you have Musky Mayhem. Those are, bucktail, whatever Spankies are out there. I run a lot of their Hunzy tails. They just hit the market and they've been screaming. So I caught, I think, 64 fish on just the Hunzy tail bucktails last season. So those were absolutely on fire, and now they are in a lot of people's hands. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different lures out there. It's kind of hard to just name them all, but it's pretty wild.
So what do you recommend for like terminal stuff? So what do you like? What kind of like the pound of line? What kind of line? Do you have a specific brand? Do you like? Do you run what kind of leaders do you run? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, I like the fins braid. I use the Big Game XS. They also have a 40G that's a musky line as well. I would not go anything lighter than an 80 pound for most of your setups. If I'm using either top water, small bucktails, dive and rise, glide baits, that sort of thing, I'm using the 80 pound. And then if I'm doing any kind of rubber, where you're ripping constantly, I use 100 pound. And then I'll even go up to like sucker rods. I'll even go up to like 130 pound, just because that hook set is such a just a whack on the line. I mean, straight contact with the fish. So you can't actually snap off. And that's the last thing you want to do, is leave a sucker rig inside a muskie's mouth. So, yeah, I know some people will downsize to a 50 or like 65 pound for like springtime stuff, but I've never done that and haven't had an issue catching fish with like the 80 pound for those kinds of setups. But, and then I do like it's Pandemonium tackle. They have it's called was it a Rosewell leader, I think it's called. But it's like it's not metal, but it's kind of bendy, so it's almost like a titanium would be, like on like a Terminator spinnerbaits, how that shaft or whatever like just bends right back versus being in the net and getting bent, and then it's no good. So they bend right back. But those are basically like a wire leader right to welded ring and then a split ring. So there's really no room for error, where nothing's going to happen. Your snap's not going to come unloose, that sort of thing. So that's kind of what everybody's really going to now. You actually get better action out of your baits with a split ring versus just a swivel clamp or something like that too.
That's actually interesting.
Yeah. Well, that's us sitting here thinking.
Well, sometimes I'm stubborn. I'm like, I don't need that.
Well, I mean, so for a lot of our panfish stuff, we do end up using a lot of loop knots, and we've gotten mixed feelings from a lot of our colleagues, because they're like, well, the fish can see it, and then some people just like swear by it, and I just feel I feel just the way that we fish, like the bait movement benefits from having that space rather than being straight tied to it. There's something to be said about, for us, a vertical versus horizontal, and you can always switch that, but just generally I just feel like having that more space. So when you say that, even when you go up to a fish like a muskie, having that extra space with the split ring, giving your bait a little bit more room to move, that's just interesting. That goes with the
Yeah, and really it's the same principle you're saying with the loop knot. You just want your bait to be more free and have more of its natural action versus being constrained by that swivel or whatever it may be. But
well, and it's good to hear that you're using the fins line. We in the last few years, we've recently been slowly switching our stuff over, finding what works for us, and we've really enjoyed using it. It's been really nice. I besides the performance, I really like that. So far my high vis hasn't faded out to white, so that's really nice, because that's what I always run into. It always seems like my color leaves, and then I have super expensive braid on my rod that I can't see And that's all I bought it for, was because I wanted to see it. So I ended up stripping a bunch off so I can get back to the color. And so far I haven't had that issue.
If you
So-
can't see it, the fish can't see it.
You're well, there's always that. But yeah, no, that's cool that you're using that. Do you have a favorite color that you like to run on your stuff?
So I actually like the blue for most everything. I mean, you think about it, a fish is looking up, and whether they can see color or not, I mean, that's whatever. But usually, you know, blue sky or cloudy sky, you know, if you have a darker colored line, those fish looking up can actually probably see that darker color line better than they could a blue or a white. So yeah, if you're especially clear water fishing, I fish a lot of blue, and then I actually like white line as well, just for the fact that when you're working like, you know, your glide baits or your small kind of dive and rise that you kind of want to dart, you know, side to side and really get erratic with them, you can actually tell what your bait is doing without visually seeing it, just by what your line is doing and kind of how your line is hopping, you know, back and forth. You can see that bait is running true.
I get another because when I'm doing pan fishing, crappie fishing, you know, we have like those little tiny up bites, those little tiny bites, you know, and so sometimes you watch your line jump, whoop, you know, the tiniest little bump could be a really great bite, right? But I don't ever expect that to be true with muskie. So it's just interesting for me to hear, you know, you say like, oh, watch your line also, because I'm like, oh, are they just gonna like grab it? But I mean, I guess my muskies sometimes we have a delicate bite as well.
Yeah, and you're not really watching your line, you know, for the bite per se. You're watching the line for the action of your lure is kind of what you're doing. As far as a bite goes, like on a muskie, that's kind of a funny thing that you brought up, because there are so many people that just have no idea what a muskie hit feels like, especially like with bucktails. A lot of times those fish will be following from behind the bait and just overtake the lure, you know, so they suck it in and they keep coming right with you, you know. So I've actually had people like you can see them look at their reel, and then they just keep on reeling, and it's like, hey, set the hook. You know, I always tell people hook sets. Yeah, I always tell people hook sets are free. It's okay if you waste one. You know, I'm not going to be upset. But there's been plenty of times where people didn't realize that they got bit, and then all of a sudden you see the muskie coming in. It's got half their bait hanging out of its mouth. It's like, hey, you should probably set the hook there, bud. But yeah, like, and then say rubber baits. I mean, if you're letting that bait fall down to a certain depth, usually it's like 1 second per, you know, 1 foot of water. You know, you kind of count it down a little bit to get it deeper into the water column. And if that fish, you know, hits that bait, it's basically like bottom bouncing for bluegills. You just feel a little tick, and you cross their eyes, because I mean, they've got it. So yeah, it's not always like being, you know, you figure 45-inch fish is just going to slam you, which sometimes they do, and that's awesome. But they also, you know, it depends on how that fish eats the bait too. It's not every one of them is going to hit it and turn sideways with it and just give you, you know, all the world. But yeah, so it can be finesse as well.
Well, and that's actually, I love you. I love hearing that, because I think earlier I'd mentioned you were saying my walleye, or we were walleye fishing when I caught my first muskie, and I said, oh, I thought it was a walleye. But I think exactly what you're describing is what happened to me, is because we're, you know, walleye can be big fish too. I mean, that sounds stupid, but I think a perfect example of, but we're also used to, but a walleye can be a little bite. And so when it came in, and I was like, no kidding. Right. But I think that's really funny. And I think it's another perfect example of why you go out with a guide, right? Especially if you are new to the sport, especially if you're learning how to do this, because sometimes those little bites come along. Another funny thing, we have this when we're in the boat, and sometimes you have a bait that you drag over by some weeds and stuff, because fish love that too, right? But sometimes you grab a weed and you're like, I can't tell if it was a weed or a fish. And so we'll say weed or fish, hard to tell. I don't know. It's just this funny thing that, I don't know, it always kind of comes back up, right? But I think that, again, perfect example is, you know, these little bumps, these little things, you know, are you coming through a weed pile? Are you getting a fish bite? Are you, you know, what are these different things? When you have a guide, you have somebody there who can help explain and put some of these puzzle pieces together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not saying just because that's my profession, you know, that you should hire a guide, but honestly, the learning curve is just so steep, you know, especially musky fishing. There's so many variables, and the little things is what makes the biggest difference, between catching 4 fish or not seeing a fish, or, seeing 6 fish chase your bucktail and not being able to trigger that fish into eating. So just to go with somebody that, already has been there, done that, kind of knows the program, knows what those fish are doing and how they're, can read the fish and how they should be reacting to kind of tell you, hey, maybe next time try this. This is what usually works when that fish does this, whatever example you want to throw out there. But I know that when I first started musky fishing, I didn't have anybody to teach me, and I pretty much struggle bust my entire way through it until I didn't catch anything, and I learned real quick that you need to figure out what's going on and do the little things, and that those really count. So I wish that I would have had somebody to show me the ropes and, kind of, regress that learning curve a little bit. I think that would have been great as far as, actually being able to go out and do it on my own. So.
Well, and I think going way back into the conversation, if people are just joining us, hit the beginning of the conversation, because you were telling us about your guide service and how you spend the first half an hour just teaching basic stuff. And I think that not only are you hiring like Musky Guarantee guide service, but you're hiring like, it's almost like a camp or like a school, it's stuff that you'll be able to carry through. Those are skills that you carry through far after they leave your boat. They can bring that stuff home. They can apply it to whatever other fishing they do. So I think that's, when you are going out with a guide, those kinds of things, that's what you're paying for. You want to go out, you want to have a good time, catch some fish. But I think ultimately that knowledge that you gain is worth what you pay for.
Right. And like I actually learned very quickly. So the first year that I took people out, I asked a lot of questions. I probably asked my clients more questions than they asked me, as far as, things that they enjoyed, things that they liked, things that they disliked about, how I was running my trips. I wanted it to be their trip, and I didn't care anything about myself, which if you're guiding and that's what you care about, you probably shouldn't be guiding. So I learned a lot from, client trips and asking questions and actually listening to the answers and caring about those answers. But I did learn very quickly that the fish really doesn't matter to people. Some people it does, but for the most part, it's, the knowledge gained on that day to help them kind of up their game on their own is what people are after. So to me, I mean, I post a lot of little tips and tricks and all that on my guide page on Facebook, just to help people, even if they're not booking trips with me. I feel like my job, or I'm able to do what I love for a living because I'm sharing information with people. So that's genuinely how I feel. And that's kind of how I run my trips, and kind of how I go about my business. So yeah, it's not always about the fish. Yes, it's great to get a 45 incher in the net, but it's more so about the knowledge gained and what you can benefit and take with you from that trip.
Well, I know that at this point everybody is so excited to get out and hit the water, and it's almost the weekend, and they're all ready to be booking with you. So do you have any dates left open for this guide season?
I do have a few here and there. I know June is pretty much completely full. I think I got like 2 open days for the whole month, but those are like my days where I just, take care of things I need to take care of. July, I might have maybe 2 or 3 dates. August, I probably have 6. And then September is right around the 6 or so. And then October is about halfway full. So I don't really book anything past October because we never, basically into November, I don't book because I don't really know what we're going to get for weather or ice or anything like that. So when the time comes, then I'll put out a post and basically say, if you guys want to get out, then let's do it. Otherwise, I don't book ahead of time for November.
Cool.
Nice.
So you said maybe check out your Facebook page. Do you have a website, or is your Facebook your main contact?
Yeah, I do have a website. It's www.muskyguarantee.com. I do not get on that very often. I don't think I've updated it in probably 2 or 3 years. but I do a lot of my business on my Facebook page. It is Musky Guarantee Guide Service LLC on Facebook. Go check that out, follow along. I do share, basically stories and tips and tricks and all this stuff from days on the water. I post, videos and just a bunch of cool stuff on. Well, I think it's cool, but
Yeah, it is.
yeah, I try to be pretty active on there and answer people's questions and help people out when I can. So yeah, otherwise, obviously get a hold of me through text or call or whatever, but my cell phone 715-490-5088.
Perfect. And I know that we're going to be probably bumping into you on the water this year because we did a bunch of times last year. You probably didn't even know it. But our cars are always at the same launches, and that's so funny. But thank you so much for being here tonight and chatting with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks again for having me on. It was fun.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Mhm.
And I know that there's going to be a lot of people out fishing this weekend, so hopefully everyone has fun themselves. But let us know, what are you catching? What are your water temperatures? All those different things, because we love to know all that kind of stuff. And maybe on your drive out, you can listen to one of these podcasts, because these are all available on YouTube as the video or as a podcast as well. So I guess find that wherever you get your podcasts. You should know, just search. But otherwise, we are looking forward to the weekend, hopefully hitting the water, and looking forward to chatting about it on next week's edition of The Night Bite.
Night, everybody.